Hi, and welcome to SproutChat, our monthly conversation with marketing professionals designed to share insights with our community. You're here with your hosts. I'm Joe Huber, the customer community strategist here at Sprout Social.
I'm Olivia, our social media specialist here at Sprout.
And this month, we're talking all about B2B marketing. And our guest this month is Pierce Delisle. Pierce leads LinkedIn's North American Content Marketing Evangelist team, who serve as in-house experts on all things content marketing. Hi, Pierce. How are you doing today?
Great. Thank you so much. And great to be here, Joe and Olivia.
Yeah, thanks for having us. Thanks for coming on the show.
Cool. So, Pierce, every month we like to start with an icebreaker. And this month we want to know, if you could live in any TV show, which one would it be and why?
Wow. Great icebreaker. I definitely might borrow that one moving forward. So I guess a timely TV series I'm super into is Westworld. So I think why I chose that show is, essentially, no spoiler alerts here, but, it's essentially set in the future. So you get a nice sneak peek into what the future holds. But the big catch would be you'd still be able to experience some of the different worlds that are featured in that show, from the Wild Wild West to Samurai World, et cetera. So to me, it'd be a good blend of future forward, but also still be able to kind of like live in past worlds as well.
Oh my gosh, I really like that. That's a really good one. But the other thing is, you probably wouldn't want to live as a host, right? You'd want to live as a guest?
Yes, totally. All about the guest situation. Yeah.
That I can appreciate. I changed my answer because yesterday during practice, Olivia and I were talking about this, and I said originally The Office, and then we both decided that would be miserable, and then I was like, Game of Thrones, yeah. Well, but that's my favorite show. And then I said Game of Thrones, which is my other favorite show, and both of those sound actually terrible. And then I was like, all right, 30 Rock, because that one's pretty safe. I work in content. I'd like to work in TV. It'd be kind of fun. So I was like, okay, let's just stick with that. Although I might not want to deal with all the Jennas of the world.
Yeah, I think mine came pretty naturally. I would choose Parks and Recreation because I feel like in a lot of other shows, there's always like someone that you can't really relate to, but I love every single character in that show. So I think I would just laugh every single day if I lived in it.
Yeah. Well, that's good. Laughing, yeah.
I guess I shortchanged the social aspect with my answer, so I probably have to work a little harder to make some friends on Westworld.
Yeah. Well, that's like making friends and laughing. Those are good things. Those are things that make us happy. We're here to make you happy, so we're going to do that by dropping some serious B2B knowledge.
It's a little bit of a stretch, but
it's a pretty big stretch, actually. Well, I think our expectations are high. We're going to get us kicked off here. What do you say, Pierce? You ready for the first question? Awesome. Okay, let's jump in. The first question is, how is B2B marketing different from B2C, and how are they the same?
Great first question to get it started. So I think the typically more complex products and services that B2B marketers are tasked with building demand or building their brand for, typically require a lot more detailed and complex marketing strategies. So I think that the three biggest ways that I see this show up is, first and foremost, they just have more distinct, more informed target audiences that are then looking for very, very detailed, specific information. So in other words, whether to buy or evaluate or find more information on an enterprise SaaS cloud solution is a much, much more comprehensive decision than choosing what toothbrush to buy or what book you want to read next. I think the second thing, kind of dovetailing off of that, is in the B2B world, there's just much, much more expansive buying groups. Decisions aren't just made by one or two people. It's a collection of individuals ranging from the C-suite to the actual practitioners of that product or service to actual technology people who actually know the ins and outs of whatever product and service that they're looking to sign up for. So point being, it's just a little bit more of a complex decision-making process. Lastly is just like the length of the overall sales cycles. We see that they're much, much, much longer given all the complexities we just talked about, the more complex buying groups, the more complex product and services. So even with all the great different data sets and abilities to track users, I think we just find that it's just a much, much, much more inexact science when we're talking about a B2B buyer's journey versus a B2C journey. Flipping over then to the actual similarities, and that's kind of like what I like to focus on more so than just what's different, is that despite all these differences that I just went through, I think the one lesson that B2B marketers should really take away from the B2C space is that while they're targeting these personas, whether it's the C-suite audience or technology decision maker, they're still people at the end of the day. So I think B2B marketers get so caught up in these personas, but they kind of lose the sight of that they're still marketing to a human being with emotion, thoughts, etc. So rather than just getting so immersed in what they're trying to communicate, they need to really focus on how they communicate, and specifically better establishing who they are as a brand, using a more conversational tone versus the stereotypical B2B corporate monotone kind of speak, and then just creating content that has much more emotion, much more creative depth than just the speeds and feeds of what they're trying to promote.
Yeah, I really love that last point. I think really if you remember one thing, it's that B2B is always human to human connection still. And I think too, like letting that come through in your content and being empathetic, showing that you're transparent, and really showcasing all of your values.
Yeah, absolutely.
So speaking of content, let's move on to Q2. So what type of content do you think B2B brands should produce more of?
Yep. So I was actually just reading this study that Forrester did assessing, senior level decision makers and just what types of content have the biggest influence over them during their decision making process. And I think one of the most insightful things that study yielded was according to them, they said that 65% of B2B decision makers say that the content that they're confronted with is largely just regurgitating the same established trends, predictions, industry tips and tricks that they're accustomed to seeing elsewhere, right? So in other words, it's this pretty much sea of sameness, when in fact what they're actually looking for are really bold, provocative, sharp points of views. So I think most B2B brands are really, really guilty of just being super conservative. They're afraid to take a stance. They're afraid to be wrong. But in embracing that kind of conservative approach, they end up falling into that sea of sameness and kind of blend into the rest of the content field and what everyone else is saying. Do you guys listen to this podcast called Pivot, hosted by Kara Swisher and Scott Galloway at all?
I don't usually know.
I haven't, no.
Highly, highly recommend it. It's all kind of about the latest and greatest predictions in the tech space. And one of the recent podcast episodes, the host Scott Galloway, I thought he made a really astute point about how to make trends and predictions and the secret sauce about how to kind of construct them. And what he said was that the key to making a great prediction is to try to make a prediction to learn versus just to try to be right? With the rationale being, if you're aiming to make a prediction that's only right, you'll really never have an innovative prediction and you really never differentiate your brand. Mm-hmm. But if you make a data-backed, well-informed prediction that ultimately ends up being wrong, you'll still garner a lot of respect from your audiences, from the community, and you'll likely be an actual catalyst for a really productive conversation.
Yeah, I'd like that a lot. And so some of the things that you mentioned there are taking risks, making predictions, busting out. And so we had the G2 CMO, Ryan Benici, came over to Sprout a couple months ago, and he talked about taking risks and being measured about that. And it's everything in marketing is not just about taking risks, and it's not just about taking predictions, but it's about learning along the way. And I really like the way that you framed that up, because that to me is probably the most important thing about like understanding those trends and understanding those different ways we learn.
Yeah, definitely.
Quick shout out again to Scott. Definitely borrowed that concept a bit, but completely agree with his point of view on that.
Yeah. No, I love that. And it's because, again, I think it's about trends. And that brings us to question 3, which is how can a B2B brand tap into video trends?
So specific to LinkedIn, we actually see that our members are actually spending 3 times as much time spent with our sponsored video content as they actually do with our static sponsored content. Yet the majority of brands that I meet with when I'm doing my one-to-one consultations are still largely rooted in traditional formats, like promoting static blog posts, gated ebooks, and largely just through static content promotion. The reason why I think though video is just such a compelling format is just it affords the ability to tell these like really, really complex stories in easier to digest manners, as well as making a seemingly boring topic like workplace productivity or virtualization suddenly a lot more compelling. And if you think about it, these are core fundamental challenges that most B2B marketers are faced with, right? Telling complex stories more easily and making some boring message a lot much more interesting. So I think B2B brands should really be investing in tapping into the full breadth of video content, right? Not just defaulting to the stereotypical talking head type formats, customer testimonials, product demos, but going back to what we were talking about earlier, content that really taps into the heart of like entertainment, creativity, and more of that emotional human-to-human connection.
I hear that.
Yeah, those were like a lot of the same insights I had on this question. But like definitely I've seen a lot of B2B brands use video for informational content like product demos specifically, but keeping in mind that human-to-human connection element and thinking about how you can spark emotion through video, because to be entertained you really have to feel something, and that's achieved through good storytelling.
Yes.
And also just shameless plug to our last SproutChat with Sierra Council. We talked all about social video, so anyone who's watching, go ahead and check it out.
It really was good content. She's like, it's good.
Yeah. Do you have anything else to add there, Pierce?
Yeah, I mean, one other thought we were talking about kind of like the entertainment and emotional content, video content specifically. I think, especially when we're talking about building your overall brand, to me, it's paramount. And I think so often B2B brands kind of skip that step right into, what are the speeds and feeds? What are our products? What do we actually do? And kind of overlook who we actually are as a brand. And I think that's really, really where video lends itself well to.
Definitely. So moving on to Q4, there are a lot of people that B2B brands can work with, whether that's influencers or other teams. So who do you think B2B brands should be collaborating more with?
Yeah, good question. So I think we can all agree that, we don't have infinite amount of resources as marketers for the most part, I want to say anyway, or the brands that I personally meet with anyway. So I think brands need to better utilize the resources that they have at their immediate disposal, and specifically tap into their employee base and their internal subject matter experts first and foremost before starting to reach out externally to these other influencers and things that can be super resource intensive, both in terms of time and actual dollars. Ultimately, why this matters is because people inherently trust other people more than they trust faceless brands. Specific to LinkedIn, we actually see a 2x lift in engagement when the exact same piece of content is shared from an individual or employee versus from a brand, right? So insert IBM sharing out a white paper, and then insert IBM, an employee at IBM sharing out that same white paper. We see a 2x lift in that amount of engagement from that same exact asset, right? That said, the idea of kind of harnessing and building out this influencer strategy isn't new, but I think the flaw I see with most influencer marketing strategies is that brands often try to identify the people internally with like the sexiest, highest, loftiest titles versus identifying the people who can actually have the biggest influence. So I'd encourage them to focus on the people with actual subject matter expertise, but more importantly, the people who have a compelling presence, who can tell really impactful stories, and build meaningful relationships with an audience. And those things also oftentimes don't overlap with just who has like the biggest title or who is like in that C-suite executive office.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things, so we have an agency network group. It's the agency network by Sprout Social on Facebook. And we just started doing a new thing where we, on Fridays, right near the end of work, I'm sitting down with some different people in the office that have something to talk about to agencies, something to share about it. So I talked to someone that worked in an agency and kind of like what that's like transitioning over to corporate and back over to agencies. And I talked with somebody about webinars and how agencies can leverage webinars. So it's all about that subject matter expert. And like you said, it's not always going to be the CMO Jamie Gilpin here. So she's brilliant, but she can't do everything anyways either, right? And it's finding those people that can deliver value. And I think it's all about like that subject matter expert. One of the other things that you said was the 2 times lift in engagement. And so obviously you're thinking about engagement as a metric. And when I'm thinking about metrics for these kinds of things, I'm going to bleed that into our next question, which is, what are the most important metrics for B2B brands to measure?
Right. Yeah, this I think is one of the most critical debates and topic areas that we need to actually focus more time on as B2B marketers. But I think most B2B brands are far too focused on just measuring short-term black and white KPIs like overall volume of leads, cost per lead, ROI, average deal size, etc. This is mainly due to the fact that one, it's just seemingly more impactful for their key internal stakeholders, right? And then two, it's just easier, right? It's the tools that they have in place, and it's the reports that most people are accustomed to reporting on, and their stakeholders are accustomed to seeing. I think we need to expand beyond what they're measuring and to also include KPIs that help assess things like their overall brand and brand equity. So expanding it further up the funnel to measure metrics like share of voice, brand sentiment. At LinkedIn, we can help enable brands to assess like topic ownership. So how well is a given brand, quote unquote, owning a specific topic on our platform, like AI, like digital transformation, and that then being a better proxy then to say down funnel then how your lead generation programs might be performing. I think there's too many times that marketers are just making decisions based on half the picture, based on purely down funnel metrics, like the previous ones I just mentioned, and then they start tweaking their campaigns based on those metrics, but are kind of missing out on the holistic picture that maybe it's just a byproduct of their brand just isn't strong enough. They haven't reached the right subset of stakeholders. They haven't deeply penetrated their audiences enough to even start working through their pipeline initiatives.
I think it can get really easy to only focus on those first metrics that you mentioned, but branching out and focusing on those metrics that are measuring really connection, but also equity and awareness are really important. And then also focusing on those metrics will eventually lead to more ROI and a more loyal audience at the end of the day.
Definitely.
The bigger picture versus thinking through on a campaign by campaign, week to week, month to month measurement basis. But it's just a stark departure from where we are, where most of us are today versus future state, I think, where we're going to have to start leaning towards.
Definitely. Cool. So we're moving on to our final question. What is one B2B brand that is dominating social today?
Great. So I think the common default brands I typically either hear or even I point to myself as being best in class or like an IBM or Google. But I'd like to just talk quickly about one that I think is kind of a little bit more under the radar in Slack. I think they do a great job of having a really comprehensive content strategy, combining a steady, always-on stream of just really, really practical, helpful advice for their target audiences on how to do workplace productivity better. In addition to excellent customer marketing content to really help enable their existing customer base to utilizing Slack better, to a concerted effort just to drive more pipeline, obviously. But I think what really separates them in my eyes is a lot of what we talked about, kind of like that human-to-human connection, the creativity. They have a really, really established, distinct, ownable, repeatable look and feel that I think immediately separates their content in our newsfeed, our LinkedIn newsfeed specifically. I also think they understand the importance of tonality. When you read through their copy and actually just consume their content, you can tell that they're speaking directly with their prospects and customers like people, versus a target audience or a persona. And I think that can all manifest itself holistically to really, really authentic, much more compelling, differentiated B2B brand experience than what we typically see.
Yeah. So first of all, I love all of that. And especially because when you're talking about Slack, you're talking about like that human connection, that's their product. If they're not doing that, then like they need to make sure like what you're doing needs to reflect who you are too. And so it's kind of that idea too. I love that you call that out.
Yeah, Slack is also one of my favorite examples. But I think another really good one to call out is Adobe. For a lot of the same reasons, but specifically I love how they are using user-generated content, or UGC. Their Instagram account feels like my dream Pinterest board honestly. And I think it's so effective because all of the UGC comes directly from their customers. Really, at the end of the day, showcasing the power of their product. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I wanted to say thank you so much, Pierce, for coming on the show today. It's been great having you, and you've had some really awesome insights.
Great. And thanks to you, Joe and Olivia. I appreciated the time.
Yeah. We also want to say thank you to everybody watching today. Thank you very much.
And we'll be back next month on October 30th with one of our agency partners to talk about all things agency life. So if you want to learn more about the Twitter chat, you can find us at SproutChat or tweet us using the hashtag.
You can also join the conversation on Facebook in our group titled appropriately, #SproutChat, and we'll see you soon.